Welcome to MediaTek Exec Talk, the podcast that keeps you at the forefront of today's most transformative technologies. In this episode, we're discussing the new era of IoT innovation. Anshel Sag, Principal Analyst at Moor Insights, chats with Samir Sharma, Associate Vice President of IoT at MediaTek. They chat about the latest IoT trends in industrial applications, fitness, cities, and more.
Thanks for joining us today on this podcast. Today we'll be discussing IoT, and I just wanted to kick things off by asking, what are some of the latest trends you're seeing in IoT?
Anshel, I think to answer that question, I think it's always useful to get a bit situated in where we are in the broader IoT journey. I was working in IoT when it was called embedded, and I've seen this sort of move from everything getting connected to everything becoming intelligent. And now we are what I would call in the early stage of autonomy phase. And in parallel with that, we've seen the evolution of the corresponding AI capabilities. So edge AI, which was a term we've been using for a while, computer vision, a lot of those applications came from IoT or were applied to IoT verticals. And of course, generative AI is now the big game changer that's going to transform everything, including IoT verticals. But it's always useful to take a step back and say, wow, what a journey we've been on, and where do we go from here, right? So some of the trends we are seeing, the first one is more and more compute at the edge. We've been talking about this for a while, and finally, I think we're seeing a lot of real life implementations of these capabilities. So for example, cameras becoming more intelligent and autonomous, and then helping in multiple use cases, right? Could be for defect detection in industrial manufacturing, could be for better traffic management on our roads and reduction of accidents and better safety for transportation. Could be for fleet management, where the cameras are about helping us make the fleet operation more efficient. We're obviously seeing edge AI applications and IoT applications in healthcare as well. And I think ultimately it's three big trends all coming together that we've talked about for some time. It's physics, it's laws, and it's economics. And what I mean by that is a lot of the action happens at the edge where you and I, we all live, where the machines we interact with could be a car, could be a thermostat in our home, could be MRI machine in a healthcare setting. But in all these cases, you want to do as much processing as you can at the edge and only send back data to the cloud that's absolutely needed. And you do that because by physics, I mean you want low latency, you want real-time responsiveness. From a legal perspective, many companies would want this data to stay within the confines of their premise, so on-premise implementations. Many countries would like to make sure data doesn't leave their borders. So there are legal implications to that. And then finally, the economic piece is that if we assume all the data will move to the cloud, get analyzed, and then come back as a decision, that's going to consume a lot of bandwidth. Every time we process data or move it, we are using up energy and electricity, which is becoming a bigger issue every day. So for economic reasons as well, we will want to make sure that most of the data or as much of the data can be processed at the edge as possible. The challenge in the past was we never had this level of compute, but I think that's changing very, very rapidly.
Yeah, and I think one of the big trends I've noticed in IoT is also the embrace of AI. Could you possibly tell us how generative AI will actually shape our everyday lives related to IoT?
That's a very broad and loaded question. So I'll break this down into how I believe generative AI will change the way we live, the way we work, and the way we play. Let me start with the work, more from a productivity perspective. So whether it's an IoT setting or an enterprise setting, we are seeing a lot of use cases for generative AI to make things more productive. The most obvious ones are things that we are all familiar with today, ChatGPT or Cloud or Gemini kind of tools helping us summarize complexity or write emails as an assistant. But that's just the tip of the iceberg, right? We're scratching the surface with that. There's going to be a lot more applications for productivity. In fact, to share something that we did within MediaTek, we had a competition where our employees could submit tools and use cases on top of the internal AI infrastructure. They have access to all the latest public models. And we said, go build out, use cases or agents that will help you in your daily lives to help productivity, whatever the topic might be. And we got hundreds of submissions. So that tells you that there is a strong move within enterprise, within IoT, to to adopt these tools. When it comes to the living part, I think everything from how we entertain ourselves, how we connect with our families, how we take care of our health is going to start getting transformed. Because ultimately it's about taking this old concept of a recommendation engine and making it more into a predictive, personalized engine, and then applying it to every aspect of how we live, work, and entertain ourselves. And obviously the third part is how we play, whether it's traveling, whether it's entertainment. How many times have we spent in front of our TV trying to find the right thing to watch? And this despite all the advances in recommendation and personalization engines. I think GAI takes it to the next level. I think the data is going to be much more personalized, much more interactive, and much more relevant to what we are looking for.
It also seems like there's an opportunity to reduce the digital divide. What are your thoughts on that?
Anshel, it's a very deep and very important question, because technology is a tool and ultimately we use it to improve things around us. But frankly, as I'm at a different stage in life, I also think about what kind of world we're going to leave for our kids. You and I have exchanged notes on our kids and the stage of life they're at. And I think our responsibility is to make sure that we use technology to improve things, to hand off a better state of affairs in our society at the global level to the next generation. And my thoughts on this are driven as much by my work as a GM at MediaTek as it is by my contribution and my participation in public policy think tanks. So I sit on the board of directors for Inno Center for Transportation. And one of the big topics we discuss is how we have to make sure that as we spend billions of dollars refurbishing, invigorating our infrastructure, our transportation infrastructure, how do we make sure we do it in a way so that it benefits everybody? If you take just transportation as an example, it's the means for anybody to get to whatever they're doing, right? They're trying to meet somebody, they're trying to get to a job, they're trying to take their kids to whatever activities they may have going on. So transportation becomes a very fundamentally critical infrastructure for our life. And verbiage and phrases like on the right side of the track or the wrong side of the track, I think these developed over decades of, frankly, mismanagement. And I think there's an opportunity using technology to make sure that when things are implemented, affordable, reliable, safe transportation in this particular case is available to everybody. But also through the availability of connectivity, access to education, we can make sure that classrooms that in some of the poorer neighborhoods in our cities have access to the latest technology. I mean, there's no point in having a device if that device is not connected. The device has to be capable, right? So we have to bring the cost of technology down. We have to use capabilities like AI to democratize access to this technology. And I think at MediaTek, as part of our mission, this is something we take very seriously. We believe that the technology should be available to everybody at the best possible price. Of course, our customers love it, but I think there is a big societal benefit to this as well.
And building on some of your thoughts on infrastructure, how do you see MediaTek's role in IoT improving people's lives with smart city applications?
So smart cities is a very broad category, and I tend to, frankly, not like the phrase that much, only because I think smart cities implies an overabundance of focus on technology. And it's not about technology, it's about people. So if I could go back and scratch that and change it to something like happier cities or safer cities or sustainable cities, I would love to be able to do that. But I think bottom line is in cities applications, our customers are seeing use cases that fall into one of the three buckets, either improving public safety, improving transportation, or improving sustainability. Now, underneath this, there's a lot of use cases, right? And by the way, there's intersection between these buckets. For example, a traffic camera at an intersection will tend not to just improve the transportation flow, but will make overall transportation and certainly those intersections safer. Sustainability is a big focus. Pollution, silent pollution, invisible pollution is a big issue in many parts of the world. And sensors at the edge can detect pollution, can help warn you, especially if you're susceptible to some of the impact. And through crowdsourcing, we are actually already seeing the human aspect of crowdsourcing and the sensor aspect coming together, where you're able to see which are the most polluted areas in a city, what to avoid at what time to avoid going into those areas. For example, if you have a compromised lung health, right? So a bunch of these use cases are coming together, and ultimately I think the objective should be happier, safer, more sustainable cities. And we've got multiple customers, starting mostly with Asia, who are starting to implement MediaTek-based solutions in this space.
And you talked a lot about healthy people and healthy cities. And I was curious if you could tell me about how smart fitness is another segment where connected technologies are helping people. Can you talk a little bit about how, MediaTek's role in smart fitness is improving people's lives?
This is one of the biggest segments where I think MediaTek platforms have been adopted very quickly. Some of the biggest players, the most popular players like Peloton, like Nordic Track, are very good customers of ours. And when I talk to them, they are looking at this from a more holistic perspective, right? And even the customers want that holistic perspective. So it comes down to not just exercise and fitness in the classical sense, but also nutrition and recovery, including sleep. And I think the mental health aspect of it is becoming as important as physical health. So all of these things ultimately require as much advanced sensing as possible. It could be your heart rate, it could be how you're sleeping, it could be how much you're pushing your body and your heart rate when you're exercising. It could even be things like continuous glucose monitoring. And all of these involve some level of sensing and constant sensing at a very, very low cost in a very, very power efficient manner. And so that you get a 24/7 view of some agentic AI analyzing this data and giving you feedback and coaching on how to lead a healthier, better life. And to me, that's the very definition of IoT, using connectivity, low power, compute, and ultimately analytics. In this case, it happens to be about you and your body and your mental health.
That's great. And you talked a little bit this a little bit before, but when it comes to transportation, how is IoT changing the way we get around?
When I talk about transportation, at least in the US, a lot of us tend to default to thinking about our cars. But transportation is about so much more than that, right? It's about the public transportation, it's about our infrastructure. And within infrastructure, it's about our roadways, our ports that are a critical part of our logistical supply chain. It's about our airports. And I think in all of these sub verticals within transportation, we are seeing so many applications of computer vision and now increasingly generative AI. And I can give you a lot of examples where MediaTek is partnering, for example, with fleet management companies, improving the human machine interface in some of these. Helping Genio platform, which is our IoT platform, is even being used for traffic management and improving traffic flows. It's being used to improve, for example, the safety at some of these traffic intersections. We know a large amount of accidents tend to happen at the intersection, and not surprisingly so, right? Because traffic is crossing on these intersections, so there's statistically higher chances. How do you make those intersections safer? How do you even do things like auto-tuning the red light, green light timings to real-time traffic? These are all use cases that our customers are exploring with us because they see the MediaTek platform as sort of this stable platform to build upon and deliver all this innovation.
I also wanted to talk about the impact of IoT in other segments, such as industrial applications and retail. Could you possibly give us a little bit more insight on that?
Retail is actually the number one segment for us. So everything from point of sales to barcode scanners to even helping our customers understand retail analytics, footfall traffic, ultimately with the intent that use cases like, hey, I want to optimize my supply chain to make sure when a customer walks in the door, they find the right product, to making sure that my end-to-end supply chain is correctly instrumented and I have visibility into it, to even things like, I want more information or understanding of what my customers are looking for. And ultimately, how do we make sure that things like, losses, we minimize those losses in the retail store. So all of these use cases our customers are using or building on top of the MediaTek platform. In the industrial use cases, we are seeing a lot of adoption around human-machine interface. So a classic interaction is some sort of a ruggedized tablet or touch screen interface to interact. And now our customers are telling us, I want to implement a human-machine interface using generative AI. So people working in a factory can actually interact using spoken language versus touch, or have a multimodal input. We're also seeing a lot of applications of defect detection using video analytics. And this is where I think the availability of pre-trained models becomes very, very critical. So those are some of the use cases we're seeing.
And how is MediaTek driving innovation forward in IoT in all of these different segments? And how do you kind of bring that together?
Anshel, when I think about innovation, I always think of that in two distinct but related terms. What is MediaTek doing at the technology level, at the silicon and the low level software to innovate? And then how are we innovating with the ecosystem? How are customers taking advantage of what we are building to deliver the end user visible innovation? So from MediaTek's perspective, it's all about access to the lowest power, lowest cost, highest possible efficient compute, whether it's AI, whether it's classic CPU, or whether it's GPU. Then we also add in capabilities like connectivity. Yeah, we are one of the leaders in 5G modem technology and also 4G. We were one of the first ones to deliver Wi-Fi 7 as an example, certainly on the infrastructure side, but increasingly also on the client side. But all of this stuff is not enough because IoT is all about ecosystem. So we work with partners like Nvidia, like Google, like Amazon, like Microsoft to make sure that they are innovating on top of the platform that we deliver. And ultimately, that translates into top use cases in smart retail, as we talked, transportation, industrial IoT, enterprise IoT, right? Video conferencing, projectors, multifunctional use cases. In education, projectors and education tablets. In entertainment, large digital signage games. Smart cities, we talked about, healthcare, but also smart home, right? How does the stuff in a home come together? That's been a tough, long journey for the ecosystem to figure it out. So I would say these are some of the ways in which MediaTek delivers innovation, but more importantly, our customers deliver 10x more innovation on top of our platform.
That's great. And speaking about, MediaTek's customers and innovation, how successful is MediaTek's IoT business today?
I think it's useful to start with, what is the nature of MediaTek's IoT business, right? It's a high leverage business. And what I mean by that is MediaTek is very, very successful in multiple areas. We are one of the leaders or the leader by volume in smartphones, in Android devices, partnering with ARM. In Chromebooks, we are the number one player in smart TVs. So as somebody who's leading the IoT business at MediaTek for US and Europe, I always look at these as capabilities that I can leverage from. So the display capability from TV or tablet can be used for digital signage, for interactive flat panel boards. The modem investments, which is billions of dollars of investment, can be leveraged for 5G IoT use cases. Similar with Wi-Fi 7. The AI engine we are building for smartphone, that also comes with, by the way, the Neuropilot, that I can leverage into my business as well. I'm explaining all this to make the point that MediaTek invests about $3 to $4 billion a year in R&D. We ship more than 2 billion silicon devices every year. And we in IoT business are able to leverage all that. And the IoT business becomes a single stop shop for my customers to take advantage of all these capabilities. We have more than 500 customers globally in IoT. We have more than 70 ecosystem partners. We have announced partnerships with Nvidia, and recently I was at Microsoft Ignite to even look at capabilities like the Microsoft Phi small language model and how it will run on the edge. And so we're able to bring all these capabilities. And so far, we are thankful to our customers. I named some of them earlier, who have helped us essentially grow this into a multi-$100 million business already at MediaTek.
That's great. And, I did see that Microsoft announcement for the 454 model, which looks really good in terms of performance. But you also mentioned NVIDIA, and could you possibly go a little bit more in detail into your collaboration with NVIDIA?
Absolutely. So as you know, we have already collaborated and talked publicly about the partnership with NVIDIA in automotive. The partnership in IoT extends that and brings some, very complementary capabilities together. MediaTek is one of the, if not the strongest player at the edge. As you know, NVIDIA has a tremendous deep learning platform that's typically run in the data center. And we said, if you think about how to make the life of an AI developer easy, we have to think about the entire workflow. We cannot provide them bits and pieces. So what we really did is sat down and thought about workflow starting with the use case, pre-trained model, how to adapt it or try to do transfer learning on it for the specific use case and the context you have, optimizing it for the specific architecture it will eventually run on, and then actually doing that testing and doing this multiple times in a loop so you find the most optimal solution. And so what we did is we combined NVIDIA's Tau, which is focused on training and transfer learning, with our Neuropilot software, which is more focused on inference, in a single workflow. And really, Anshel, what we were addressing with this, or we are addressing with this, is the number one challenge our customers have in this fast-paced world of AI. I mean, the models are getting updated. Talent is very hard to find. When you invest in your AI software, you want that to be reusable, scalable. And so we solve all of these three big problems by having this joint offering. Every quarter, we are finding more customers who are taking advantage of these capabilities. And I invite more customers to come and talk to us about this.
As you talk to customers and, talk about the AI, IoT space, what are some of the challenges that companies are facing in this space, and how is MediaTek helping them to address them?
Yeah, I think we talked about AI. I think today that's the number one topic. Almost every customer is bringing up. It doesn't matter which part of the world they are in or which vertical they are playing in. But if we take a bit of a step back, I think there are three or four fundamental things any customer in IoT struggles with. The first one is, hey, there's a number of these fragmented verticals that I have. Can I have a stable platform that can help me address multiple verticals and multiple use cases? Because that just makes economic sense for me. I want that scalability. That scalability of my own solution has to be complemented by scalability and reusability of the underlying hardware and software. And how do I get there? Right? That hardware and software has to have all the key things. It has to have power efficient computing. It has to have connectivity. It has to have flexibility of these compute elements. It's got to have long life support, extended temperature support. It has to have multi-OS support. Some verticals need Android, some others need Linux. And in Linux, we have different distributions. So can a vendor, can a partner get me that? And then finally, the third thing is customers are saying, look, please don't deliver a piece of silicon and walk away. Be part of my journey to get to production, but also be part of my journey to go to market. Can we go and influence the end market together? And so I think in all of these three areas, MediaTek, I talked about the technology piece earlier. I talked about the reusability, scalability, our partnership with players like Nvidia and Microsoft. But I think one of the changes you're seeing MediaTek do is on the go-to-market side. MediaTek and IoT has been a well-kept secret. And I think the more we're finding our customers using our technology to create these or to enhance these top use cases, the more there is an opportunity to go tell that story together. And ultimately, it's not about MediaTek or a specific customer. It's about moving the industry forward. And I think you're going to see us lean in a lot more in the coming quarters and years in that space.
That's great. And I was just going to say, my final question is, looking ahead to 2025, do you have any predictions about how the IoT landscape might change?
If my stock picking ability is an indication, I should not be predicting anything. But what I'll do is I'll try and answer this question in the context of what I'm hearing from customers, from partners. At the risk of over-indexing on AI, that is clearly an area where we're going to see a lot more experimentation, but also capabilities in production in 2025. At least that's my hope. I've been in this technology industry for roughly 25 years. So I've seen transitions from the first internet browsers to mobile revolution to everything else we are seeing around AI. And in each one of these transitions, we went through a hype curve and a little bit of disappointment. And then over time, we saw what the impact was. And the impact was way more than we could have imagined at the start, even though we had these ups and downs, right? AI, and specifically generative AI, feels different. It feels more like we keep resetting our expectations of how big of an impact this will have. Yet the adoption and the immediate impact we are seeing is also resetting our expectations even more so. So it does feel a little bit faster paced, if I can use that phrase. So I think we're going to see some of that in IoT verticals. Frankly, a lot of the work we did in AI in 23 and 24, I see it as, it was more on the learning side. So it's like sending the machines to college. We don't do as much useful work in college as we do when we graduate and apply those skills. I think 25 will be the year where the IoT machines, the IoT infrastructure would graduate from learning to doing. And that's my hope, that's my expectation, that's what my customers would like to do. The second thing that's going to become a big focus is energy needs for this infrastructure. It's already starting to come up, and I think it's going to become a bigger issue from just raw availability of electricity and energy, but also the sustainability impact of broad adoption of AI. And so I think everything we can do in terms of more efficient power efficient computing, better distribution of the workload between the edge and the cloud will help in that matter. And the third thing, I think this promise of distributed computing, where the capabilities are not just in a device, but also comes from these devices talking to each other as almost like a community of machines, I think will become much more important and much more impactful. But we'll talk again at this time next year.
Yes, hopefully. And I was curious about your thoughts on agentic AI, and I think that's going to be a really big trend for next year. How do you see that being impacted or impacting IoT?
I think it's going to be one of the biggest trends and the more obvious trends going from human machine LLM based interaction to that personalized assistant that's doing a lot more specific stuff. And I think the reason agentic AI will be more popular and more impactful is simply because if you think about human society, we value specialists in general a lot more than jack of all trades. It's a very broad statement and may not be always true, but in general, the more specialized you are, the more value you create, the more value you deliver. And so I think agentic AI is just that natural transition from, hey, this thing can do everything to it's going to be much more purposeful and niche and therefore trained on a specific set of data for a specific set of use cases. Um, there are there's a ton of use cases that my customers are building on top of our platform, including this Nvidia MediaTek Tau Neuropilot platform to figure out how to take advantage of these capabilities.
Thanks again, Samir. I really appreciated our talk.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to getting feedback from our ecosystem on some of the ideas we've shared together.